Hello, my name is ScienceBeard and this is Teacher Myths Busted number 3. And I will put out different numbers at different times. This is just the one I felt like doing now. So the myth, as I've written it down here, are that teachers are obsessed with wanting to teach about sensitive issues such as racism, sex, relationships, etc. Most teachers do not want, in fact, to teach those topics, but they have to teach it as part of PSHE because they don't like it, because it's not their speciality most of the time. And they are rotated around because people don't want to do it, and so different teachers get to teach it every so often. So, what is PSHE? Essentially, it all stems from some guidance published in 2019. And this is some guidance to head teachers and teachers, school and school governors about sex and relationship education guidance. And you can see what you're supposed to teach now and what the school is supposed to have in their policy as well. And this guidance was originally published in 2000, but the current government have updated it for 2019. So you can point to Labour, but the government had a chance to get rid of it or to change it, but you have to simply keep doing it. So it has been written to take account of the revised national curriculum published in September 1999, the need for guidance arising out of the new PSHE framework and the Social Exclusion Unit report on teenage pregnancy. So they were taking aim squarely at teenage pregnancy. And you can read about what you are supposed to teach, and it's a national framework. You have no way of escaping it, unless there's one caveat, unless you are actually part of a school with a particular religious ethos. So if you are, for example, a Catholic school, then you can tweak it and not talk about the things that actually would prevent teenage pregnancy, such as condoms and anti-baby pills, although some Catholic schools also do that, I am aware. So, I'm talking merely, I'm not here to bash anybody, I'm just saying this is the stuff that we absolutely as teachers are under an obligation to teach, and you can read this for yourself. Do teachers want to teach it? No, because some teachers are deeply embarrassed by it themselves, and in there it says parents cannot always be relied on to give their kids the education that they need, and therefore some kids in particular, and I'll let you guess as to what group of kids that is, are in particular dependent on the guidance given by schools. Now, this is not unproblematic, because if you go to the guidance, it makes some pretty obvious assumptions, and some of these are based on science, and some of these have since been proven wrong, simply speaking, and or not in any way useful. So one of the things is that the focus has been usually on girls. Okay, so this guidance says secondary schools should focus on boys as much as girls. Basically, in the past, when you had sexual topics done, the emphasis was on how young women should take responsibility for their fertility. And it had almost nothing to do with boys, and this is addressed by this guidance. And that is not a bad thing. However, and it says here, traditionally the focus has been on girls. Boys may have felt that sex education is not relevant to them and are unable or too embarrassed to ask questions about relationships or sex, which is never a good idea in any way. Anyway, so ethnicity. Have a look at this. Research with families shows that children cannot always rely on their parents to talk to them about puberty or sex. True. In particular, a range of children from black and other minority ethnic communities are less likely to talk to their parents about sex and relationships. This may be true, but let's say you work at a school where there is a reasonable representation of minorities. What do? Do you take them aside? Do you focus on them? Do you, in other words, pick on them? as they would probably see it? Do you do this against the will of the parents, who maybe not willing to, who maybe are not willing to speak out when it comes to the school actually agreeing with parents what should be taught? Also, parents can just pull their kids out of those sessions if they wish to, because it isn't always appropriate. Maybe even there may be good reasons to do this. Who knows? But this is the thing: teachers can only go wrong with this. There's almost no reward in it for them. There is no reward in terms of their pay. There's no recognition by the school that they're doing a worthwhile job. They simply have to do this. Nobody says to teachers, "Well done, you've earned yourself, a step up on the pay scale because you've done in PSHE." No, teachers who teach PSHE usually have a specialty that is not PSHE, and they get exclusively judged on what they do in those other subjects. Now, they may have an enthusiasm for it, but it is actually only a possibility of getting it wrong, causing offense, and then getting a complaint made against them. So this is why teachers are not obsessed with teaching about sex and relationship education. Okay? The key points here are: all schools must have an up-to-date sex and relationship education policy drawn up by the governing body and available to parents and for inspection. So the teachers are actually not in there. When they are told you have to teach it, they have to abide by what has been set for them. A, by the government, and B, by the schools, parents and governors. This should be developed in consultation with parents and the wider community, and I have no idea how you would do that. When they are embarrassed to talk about sex and relationship, you can maybe draw up the most asinine questionnaire and then get that back. But how do you do that with details that they are not confident or willing to talk about? Primary schools should have clear parameters on what children will be taught in the transition year before moving to secondary schools, and that parents be consulted. And this includes puberty, taking responsibility, and so forth. So if you have a go at primary schools and say, well, they're teaching far too much, far too young, it is not up to them. I'm sure they would rather teach writing, reading, and maths. Secondary school policies must include how they will teach the relevant national curriculum science topics and how they will provide sex and relationship education as part of PSHE. So somehow it is as it's been put together with science. Now, in science, you're actually not supposed to talk about relationships and the different things, and you can get into real trouble if you do. But it is linked to science, and as part of PSHE, you have to. And there you have a obvious conflict. And by relationship, I mean just mentioning the fact that homosexuality exists, for example, in nature. It is not a human invention, right? And that's just one thing. I would never mention anything like that in a science context in school, because I know that it might cause offense with some people. I would, of course, not shy away if a student asked, but unless they asked, I wouldn't volunteer any such hair-raising topic, because you can only get it wrong. There's no reward in it. Policies should be inclusive of all pupils, and that's another thing. All pupils is pretty clear, so that includes LGBTQ plus pupils, and sometimes they're out, sometimes they're not, but you're supposed to know even when they're not out and when they're not self-identifying publicly, that such people exist, obviously, because they do, and that you have to take into account their feelings and their well-being. And that's absolutely right. And this is why we have to do this at school. And I actually agree with that. However, most people don't want to do this because, again, there's no reward in it for teachers. You can only get it wrong. If it all goes well, brilliant. Nobody will say well done at the end of the day. Everybody will just assume, well, that's how it works. But if it goes wrong, you have a problem. Having a policy in line with this guidance will be a key part of meeting the criteria for sex and relationship education outlined in the National Healthy Schools Standard. And there you are. You have to absolutely do it. And this is another bit of some guidance here: relationships education, relationships and sex education, and health education. And you have to absolutely teach this, and in primary and secondary. So once again, if you have a go at schools for teaching this, maybe write to your MP and protest at that level. In another Teacher Myths Busted video, I will talk about how teachers are actually conservative with a little c, most of them, okay, because they live in fear of putting a foot wrong, because that can get you fired very quickly. Okay, so I hope you found this useful, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.